We are joined this hour by Aleysha Hernandez, who's an incredible poet, a slam champion, a touring artist, workshop leader, uh, published author. I mean, an incredible writer of all in all fields of the word. Aleysha, can you tell us how you got started? I know you're here in LA now, but you originally started out in on the East Coast in Camden and Philly. Can you tell us the Camden Philly story?
Yeah, I started in Camden, where I'm from, as pretty much a hobby, just being a little kid wanting to model other people. I was actually just modeling work from I saw in a movie, a popular movie at the time. And I would go to some of the local open mics in my city. But my city didn't have a lot of opportunities to, as my city didn't have, like, it's just a hood. It's like, which is nothing wrong with that, but it's just nobody was really like feet in the arts community. And I was hungry for more once I realized it was more than a hobby. So once I got old enough, I went across that bridge, went to Philly on a train, and I was like, I'm going to these open mics, and my life changed from there. Philly embraced me a whole lot. It was great.
I got myself muted here. I was just typing for them to ask me questions below. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit of that story about the relationship between, because a lot of people who are watching this might be on the West Coast, might have lived a West Coast life. Can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between Camden and Philly? So like Philly's kind of the big city, Camden's kind of like like. Can you tell us about how that dynamic?
Yeah, it's wild because like some people joke and say Camden is East Philly. And I take that a little personal sometimes. I'm like, Camden is Camden, like that's my city. And nobody talks about Camden, New Jersey. Everyone knows what New Jersey is. You have your jokes about Jersey, but Camden for a long time, especially South Jersey, is a joke, and I understand why totally. I joke about it too. But Camden was this hood by itself, and that wasn't always like that. My parents have told me about the history of that place, but eventually it's just like mostly Black people, a lot of brown people, especially now. And it's like a Black and brown community that just gets discarded. People joke about it. If you ride through Camden, especially certain blocks, you're going to just see that it's just pretty much torn down. Gentrification has been the slowest process of gentrification I've ever seen has been in Camden. Like there's a few buildings that are just like, oh, that home is like $1 million and nobody's living in it. And then all the business is like way downtown. You have people who have condos and stuff who want nothing to do with the city. And across the bridge, you have Philly. Literally, you could walk across the bridge. But that city, they have hoods too. I lived in North Philly. I lived in a lot of places in Philly. But it's a different kind of atmosphere. You have more arts communities. You have more just established things. It's also respected more. When I say Philly, you can say that to almost any kid and they know exactly what I'm talking about, even if they don't know how to point it on the map. But Camden is like an erasure. So the older I got, the more I said, I'm gonna represent home, because home is a place that needs to be spoken about.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is that's incredible. When you talk about like Camden, Jersey, and a lot of these areas that have been just like kind of devastating. These were once like like you mentioned, like your parents talked telling stories. These were once like very prosperous, or like or working class, but like the type of working class that meant you can actually afford to go on vacation. You could do this, you could do that, kind of like an industrial center, and it's been just, I don't know. In my lifetime, I don't remember a time when that was true. But it once was, and it's really interesting to hear those stories. What about Philadelphia? What is because there's pockets of Philadelphia that are like that too, like where there's
Oh yeah, there's spots in Philly that have been abandoned, and just like North Philly in particular, the last place I lived at out there, I lived right on. If anybody is familiar with Philly, I lived on Broad and Erie. When you think of people like, the best context for someone who's not from near is, which is a terrible example, but it's like recently there was this big shootout between like police and this Black guy who was shooting from his window, and it was like viral. It was all over the news, and I live right around the corner. I used to walk right to that corner and get my favorite like turkey bacon egg and cheese sandwich with a coffee. And Kevin Hart is from around that area. It's like, so that helps people understand where I was at. But yeah, Philly's dope though. I love the city. I love how I could just get up and get on the train and be downtown really fast and sit at a coffee shop broke as hell and still be productive. But Camden's wild because like I love that city too. And obviously it has a bigger space in my heart. But there's so much history that's been erased or people don't talk about. The Walt Whitman House, Walt Whitman Bridge. Walt Whitman used to live there. Thinking of even I think Martin Luther was it Martin Luther King? My history's getting all jumbled in my head real quick. But it's a lot of like historical stuff like in that city that people don't talk about. They just talk about the poverty. They talk about how the fact it was the #1 crime city, murder capital of the country a couple times, or they don't talk about it, and it's rather wild.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll definitely, we definitely have an opportunity to talk more about Camden and Camden history
Mhm.
during the course of this interview. But I'm really curious right now to hear about. So you're leaving Camden in order to pursue more of a larger poetry scene, and you find that in Philadelphia. Can you tell our audience what it was like to enter into this larger poetry scene that you found there in Philadelphia? What was it like when you were first, kind of like cutting your teeth and getting known?
The best part, because I was never going there to be famous. When I got to Philly, when I started going to Philly, I was like 20 or 21. I felt a lot younger. I felt like a baby. But when I first feel like I was old enough to go across the bridge and go to these like nightclubs and stuff where they were having these open mics or these grown spaces, what I loved the most was that I was just being heard by more people. There's something about being from a city like mine where a lot of the voices feel like they don't have an ear. Like we feel like, silenced a lot. And I know I felt heard at my local open mics, but I was hungry for more. I was hungry for, it was a few people from Philly, and I respect them so much, who would come over the bridge and come to our city and go to our open mics once in a while. And they saw me and it was like, you should come over. Like, you should come to our open mics. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna be there. And they were so good. They were like, it was all men and they talked with their chest and they did loud poems. And I'm like, they're so great. I want to do that. So I wanted to go to their open mic, their space, that big city, Philly. When you're a 16, 17-year-old, Philly sounds like a whole nother planet, even though it was right across the bridge. And going over there, they embraced me so hard. And I made, if I can just brag on myself, which is something I don't do often without feeling weird, I feel like I made a big staple in that city. And I'm proud of myself for what I did while I was there. And for its own reasons, it ran its course, me being there. But it's always, they're both my homes, Philly and Camden, for sure.
Yeah, well, a lot of what we've been doing in the course of these interviews is give like kind of some of the oral history of venues that were here or there, and so I have a pretty good working knowledge of venues that have existed in Los Angeles, but Philadelphia, I mean that's something you have to have been there to know. I mean, just different cities to know a poetry event is the circuit of a city. You kind of have to have lived in the city, so I don't have any idea. Can you tell us a little bit about what was the poetry circuit? Tell us about some of the venues there in Philadelphia at that time.
Yeah, so you had the most historical venues I knew at the time. You had Dowling's Palace. I'm gonna shout them out first and foremost because that's where I think I went the most. Dallas Palace not only is the place I frequented the most as a poet from being 2021 all the way to the last year I lived there, but they also brought me on as a co-host. They were excited to hear my poems every time I got there. And it always felt like family. That was a space where I could be myself. That was a space where when I had a big attitude way worse than this and I didn't like the world testing me at all, I would be young and ready to just defend myself with poems, outside of poems. And I remember getting into arguments with like band members, men. I remember cussing people out. I was wild, but they never judged me for that. Granted, did we have moments where it was like, okay, that was a lot? Yeah. But nobody said, oh, you shouldn't have done that, or what's wrong with you? They knew I had a fire in me, and they were, in their own way, they helped really like fuel that in a good way. They fueled that fire. And I can say I'm way better for them. So you have Dowling's Palace, where Just Words happen. You have a poet art gallery, which still exists. Dowling's is not around anymore, unfortunately, but they're still doing open mics occasionally. But a poet art gallery is a little art gallery in West Philly that also brought me on. I did events there as well. They're absolutely awesome, run by queer Black women. You also have a few more, I think it's October Gallery. If anybody from Philly, correct me. That's probably the first place I went to going over the bridge, October Gallery. And they had like a small gallery kind of open mic. And I remember just hearing the booming voices in this little space. And I said, "Ooh, this feels great." And I kind of modeled their styles. I regret how I wrote poetry. I wrote it more for a reaction because I liked the reaction they got back in the day. But I'm glad that I learned how to be a big performer. So even though I have regrets for kind of like trying to appease the audience, they taught me a lot about connecting to an audience as far as like performance goes. So those are the top three. There's another one that I can't think of, Arts Garage. It's the last one I'll mention right now. The Arts Garage was not only a space where you can go and hear poems, it was mostly like, it was like one regular event, and then there was a lot of special events that happened there. And the Arts Garage was like this gritty old arts space, and it just felt like you was in this hip hop setting, and I love that. And one more, I promise, the Philly Pigeon. The Philly Pigeon is still happening now. If I'm not mistaken, it's the largest poetry event happening in Philly. I co-founded that with Jacob Winterstein, my homie, my friend, and they're still going strong. Unfortunately, we all know COVID's happening, but they're on doing online stuff, and it's now run by Jacob Winterstein, Kai Davis, and Jasmine. What's Jasmine's last name? Jasmine, my bad, Jasmine.
Yeah.
Cool.
So wow, that's a history lesson in like 4 minutes. Wow, that's really incredible. So can you tell us a little bit about what was the Philadelphia slam scene like, and where did that? How did you get started in
that? When I first started in Philly, I didn't know anything about slam. I was very judgmental of slam. I thought it was a ridiculous idea. But at the time, I didn't even know it because I was too old to be part of like a youth poetry. I didn't know about youth poetry when I was in Camden. So when I got to Philly, I was too old for that. But I started to see some of the younger poets like Joshua Bennett, Aleysha Harris, and all them. They were part of the Philadelphia Youth Poetry Movement team. And they would come to the open mics once in a while, especially like Just Words. And I love being honest right now, because at the time I thought it was, I thought they looked more cool than I thought the poems were. And let me explain. I wasn't into the sound of like slam poetry. Yeah. I didn't like it. There was something, I think my heart and my spirit was just in a different space where I was like, it didn't feel authentic to me. It's not saying it wasn't, not saying they weren't great. I have so much respect for each and every one of them. And their coach at the time is my brother, but it just wasn't aligned with my spirit. And then fast forward, and then there was no other slam happening in Philly as far as I know. I could be wrong. Fast forward, a friend of mine was starting to run a slam event, and he was doing one to qualify for the Women of the World Poetry Slam, and he kept telling me about it, and I was like, I'm not showing up, I'm not going. But then one day I just showed up to support. This guy puts my name on the list without me saying anything. He just puts it on there.
Yeah.
So you would think I would get upset, but when they called my name, I had no idea they were going to. I was like, I'm not going to back down from a challenge. So I went ahead and I went up there and I did a poem. It wasn't timed. I never practiced for a slam before, and I won. And then I went to Women of the World and made final stage my first year. And then after that, I was like, I love slam because it was the first reason why I ever got on a plane by myself. It was a terrible experience, but I was happy to be in the sky for free. I didn't have to pay for it. Luckily, I was very appreciative of that. And then I was like, I wanted more. What I appreciate about slam is that it just helped me connect with a lot of poets and hear different styles of poetry. And then I started to realize, kind of adjust and realize what I like and what my spirit likes. And then fast forward, I went ahead and I was trying to get an adult slam team popping. And it happened a few times, but it was messy. We didn't do good. We didn't really do good. We went to national competitions and didn't do that very good, but I love all of us. Yeah. And then I was like, let's start our own stuff, because I wasn't really fond of how the other adults were doing slam in Philly. Yeah. So I wanted to start my own. And I tried to talk to like a handful of people who was like, yeah, I'll do it. Well, I'll help you. Let's do this. But you know how people talk and aren't really about it. And that happened until my one friend, Jacob was about that life. And he said, let's do it. And I don't know how old the Pigeon is now, but we've been around for a really long time. So it's definitely, if I had to guess, like 7 years, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But it's been
So that first year you went out for slam, what city was it being held in?
Detroit.
Detroit.
First ever Women of the World Poetry Slam. I went.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that like?
They were so, oh my God, it was one of my favorite slam experiences ever. I have thoughts about slam, and it's not about the art, it's about sometimes the people. But I knew nothing about that at the time. I just knew I was about to get on a plane and be around a bunch of other women identifying poets who were amazing. And I didn't know if my art was good or not. I mean, actually, let me correct that. I thought my art, my poetry was super good and super strong because the crowds in Philly were really good at hyping me up. I definitely needed a lot of workshopping, but Philly was really good at hyping me up and making me feel like I was the best poet ever. So I went to WALPS with that confidence.
Yeah.
And I think that confidence is what led me to final stage my first year. Because if I'm being totally honest, my writing today, in my very strong opinion, is 1,000 times better. I'm a way better artist, but I have trouble in slam these days. And I really can't figure that out, but that's fine. I'm okay with that as long as I feel like I'm a better artist. But back then I had that confidence, and that's what I want again. I still have a lot of confidence, but I want that drive I had when I was 20 something going to, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have some theories about that. I mean, I think that, and this is not a critique at all, but it's kind of more like if you drive fast, you'll get to where you're going faster. If you drive too fast, you're gonna get a car accident. I mean, just logic, right? You have to say what the audience is already thinking, better than they're capable of saying it. And that's it. You can't say something that they're gonna get on the way home.
Right.
They need to get it in the moment, right? So it's almost like a comedy. You can't have a big blockbuster comedy that people are gonna get on the car ride home, right? They need to get it in the moment, right? And so like you have to have people be like, ah! like right in the moment. It can't be like subtle. 20 minutes later, I got it. And like, fuck.
Yeah.
Damn, I should have given that a 9.4. Why did I fucking give an 8? You know, it can't be. You know, like I don't know. That's just my theory about how that works.
Sense. Yeah, and I actually I never heard it put that way. I love that so much. But Women of the World was fun. They were actually, from what I can remember, I don't know if any, I had a sense that some drama was going on behind the scenes, but drama always happens at poetry slams, so whatever. But with me being a newbie and I wasn't paying attention to none of that, they were so nice to me. They cheered me on. I didn't feel any type of hate or bitterness. It was a beautiful experience, and it was something I looked forward to every single year. And yeah, it was a really great. I did terrible in final stage. I hated the way I did. I think I was just really nervous, but what I took away from that was that I made final stage, and I pat myself on the back for that to this day. I'm so proud of myself.
Yeah, you should be. You should be. You've done a number of very like high level things. You were. I'm kind of curious about this because you've been featured in the Huffington Post, for Harriet, Blavidity. Am I saying that right? Blavidity. BuzzFeed.
Yeah, BuzzFeed.
yeah. So you've been on like all these like kind of like I don't know how to describe it because there's like this like there was a period of time, and it's not as popular as it once was, but there was a period of time where a lot of these kind of like influencer websites would like publish like 6 poets from the west side of Philadelphia you must read now and everything. And so you put yourself on that circuit. Do they kind of fall like dominoes? Like once you get one, they keep going, or is it like are these all just independent different things? How does that work?
They're all independent. I mean, like when it comes to me, the attention I get or the articles I get is so unpredictable. I don't think I have like a whole like, oh, this is happening now. I have this momentum where everything's happening. I have good moments, and then I have moments where I'm like, it felt like all those good moments, like people are like, okay, whatever, stay humble. And I kind of appreciate that. Like, don't get me wrong, I would love having the most like amazing, consistent year where articles come out and I'm put on all these lists. I think a lot of people would love that. But there's something about the fact that I've had moments where it's like, oh, this great thing has happened, but not that many people are clapping for it. Or I know I'm deserving of that great thing, but it's not being talked about, or I haven't received it. I kind of appreciate those low key. I know I'm going to sound really strange. It's not like the most delightful feeling. I'm not walking around smiling like, yes, I'm not acknowledged. Nobody does that. But it took me a long time to realize I'm here for way more than the accolades. And I know that's way better said than like felt, but I'm here for more than the accolades. And when in the moment I'm not receiving the most applause, am I still doing the work I believe in? And I need to make sure that I'm showing up for that. So as long as whoever's in charge of this planet feels like I need to be humbled, whatever, I guess I'm down.
Yeah. All right, great. Good. Well, that's cool. I mean, like, that was less than a question for the audience and more question for myself. So I'm always curious, is like, like I see like boom,
okay,
boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, no. It's to the delight and for the good of the audience. That's why I'm here. But I am personally curious, like, how's that game played? All right. So another kind of stunning thing I did, just kind of like looking into some background information to get ready for this is what I don't know. You tell me, what's Ron Howard like?
Ron Howard, from what I don't know what he's actually like, because people put on what they put on when they meet you. But when I met him, he was a very, very, very nice guy who seemed like he genuinely was there to, because he had a job to do. When I met Ron Howard, he was part of, it was the first year where they were getting ready for the Made America Festival that happens in Philly, Jay-Z's festival. And they were trying to do a documentary. They ended up tossing out the part that they recorded a bunch of poets in Philly for their own reasons. But Ron Howard was part of like filming this documentary. And I'm glad I took that away from it. And he was just sweet. And he genuinely I felt like he really liked the words. He even tweeted about it. And I had no idea that he tweeted anything about me until somebody was like, Ron Howard said your name on Twitter. And yeah, he seemed like a really nice guy. I appreciated that.
Yeah. What about Christopher Nolan? He does not seem like a nice guy.
I never met Christopher Nolan, but I did something with in conjunction with the film Interstellar.
Yeah.
You say he does not seem like a nice guy. I have no idea, but I will say the people who was behind that project that was connected to the film were really nice people. That was one of the most lovely experiences I've had as far as something being filmed. They took care of us. They were nice. They didn't come across as like really Hollywood or corny. They were sweethearts.
Yeah. So I apologize for this. We should have talked about this in the prep, but I'm gonna put you on the spot now. Is there any way you can provide a poem for us?
Oh, okay.
All right, cool.
Let me pull up something I have, because I could do something memorized, but I'm tired of doing some of those poems. Okay. Give me one sec. Do a poem. I feel like where I was, it's not the same, but I feel like when I was at that slam, it's like, you're up. I'm like, no.
Yeah. And I put your name on the list.
Okay. This is a very unedited piece, but I've been reading it lately just because it means a lot to me. So here we go. My baby brother was charged for a murder he did not commit. He, a young man born in a city that reeks of death, spent 2 years behind bars thinking of death only. If Khalif Browder was not a black boy, a backpack wouldn't have been grounds for imprisonment. I'm thinking Sabrina Butler survived 7 years on death row by dreaming about her living child after being accused of murdering the one she could not revive. The definition of revival is an improvement in the condition or strength of something. Maybe in American justice, this is a myth. Maybe mostly for the marginalized, the poor, those who can be added to the numbers because they do not count the seconds that maple sap themselves into a single person cell. Nothing about this is sweet, just slow, just debilitating to the mind and muscle. And this is how you commit a crime. Actually, an American prison, as it is, kills a spirit, put the dying on death row. They become the walking dead. Nothing about this is TV. The so-called criminal here on this land is sometimes innocent, sometimes a biased or false conviction away from home, from home, from home. The actual criminal here on this land is the one who always gets to go home. after the coercion, after the insufficient evidence, after the gavel, after the promotion, after the cup of coffee. This is how you commit a crime, actually. Take away the touch, take away the empathy, take away the sunlight and ask them, what do they see? Nothing, according to Damien Eccles, who said, quote, I miss the stars, you know. I haven't seen the stars in years and years and years, end quote. And we could ask Troy Davis, but the missing is a person who caved in on their self over and over during and long after the sentencing. I am not saying I do not believe in punishment. I'm saying I believe in it just. I'm saying I believe in it lowercase, something that at least tries to bring the human back, something that recognizes what if is a question mark, not a period. Admit there is no justice here, period. Admit it is more about power than a penalty, period. Count the statistics, collect your conscience, grab it, a hold of reality, the facts inside of your fist until they fester. In other words, get a good grip and let this system go.
Yeah. Fantastic. A lot of people bullshit all the time and say like, we poets are the real journalists, right? But then they ain't talking about shit, right? And so like that's me being honest, right? So like, you know, but you really, I mean, this poem you shared right now, the poems I've heard you do in the past, you really do like, and you take the world at large, and your poetry is like journalism. I mean, that's not bullshitting. I mean, that's real. That's real. Like
Thank you.
You really are a poet of your time. Like, you know, something like that somebody can, like, you know, long time from now, if there's still a world that hasn't been swallowed by the sun, people can look back on your work and actually it could be used as a kind of a primary text to understand, like, in 2004 this thing happened, and here it is, the poet, you know, Aleysha Wise Hernandez speaking about it. You know, so that's,
yeah, poets are historians, you know. That's why I say, you know, it's kind of similar to what you said earlier. It's like we know these things happen, we see the news, we hear about stuff and yada yada, you know, but something about the way the poet delivers it to you, it makes it feel like you're hearing it for the first time. And yeah, that's important. So we're very important journalists, historians. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I yeah, appreciate it. So why is that so important to you? Because it's such a consistent thing in your work that you're always talking. I mean, this one you mentioned Khalif Browder. I want to ask you about to share with our audience a little bit about the story of Khalif Browder, but also just like before we do that, please tell us like about like your craft and the content and why it's so important for you to be like a poet historian.
I first and foremost, I mean, I feel like it's important just because it's a calling. I try to steer from cheesy answers, but sometimes cheesy is just honest. Yeah, I just something, I don't really have a direct answer off the top. It's just, it's important for me to speak the truth. You live in this world, you're an artist, you create, you feel like you have an impact, and people are still terrible people. And you're like, I need to keep doing this. And there are days where I get fed up and I'm like, why? Like, what's the point? But my spirit is a lot stronger in that. So I wake up the next day and I do it again. I keep creating the work. Also, a lot of these stories are personal. You know, I wrote this last one, but it wasn't just for the sake of like, I want to write a poem about this topic. Now, granted, I was booked by an organization I was commissioned to write this poem for around the death penalty, the topic. But it came from the heart because I did have a brother who didn't experience, he wasn't on death row or anything, but the fact that he was locked up for a crime he did not commit. And then you just see that in hoods like mine, you know, especially Black and brown people, you just see like that constant criminalization. You see them be putting on death row constantly, way higher than other individuals, and doing much more time for the same type of criminal activity. So it's personal. I don't think there's a poem I've written, even if I was commissioned to write it, that I didn't come from a personal space. I love telling stories. I treat my poems like my public diary sometimes, which some people might be against, but it's not for, I'm not doing it for validation. I'm putting loose quotes on that because I'm doing it so first of all, we all want to be seen. We want our stories to be heard. But also, I know, obviously, that there are people in similar situations that I've been through that don't have that outlet. And they're like, I don't know how to get on stage. You know, I'm sure you work with people like students, right?
Yeah.
How many students have you heard is like, oh, I wish, you know, people crying after your poem, or I wish I could tell my story like that. I wish I was brave enough to speak up. And even if they don't feel brave enough at the moment, at least they know that they're not alone in that moment. That's so important. So that's why I show up. It's personal. I do it for community, and my spirit calls for it.
Yeah. You know, we're gonna keep the focus on you, but I will say something. I mean, like, the biggest thing I try to do when I'm doing the workshops is I feel like I'm in the business of demystifying. Like, I'm here to I'm here to show you something really impressive, and then after that, I'm going to demystify the process to show you can do it as well, and that it's really important that we get our stories out because, you know, I could just speak, you know, I could speak, you know, for Black and brown people, but I could speak more specifically to my community, to you know, the people of Mexican descent, right? Our intelligence is always questioned in this country. It's always questioned, right? And for them to understand that, no, you can express yourself, and you can express yourself as well as anyone. You can express yourself at the highest levels, right? You can express yourself in a way where you're going to get all this kind of acclaim and accolades and blah blah blah. None of that really matters. But the point, because all the things that, like, anything I've achieved is not, it's not a trophy. It's a hammer. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm come back here like, yeah, I spoke at the University of Cambridge. Boom. Yeah, I spoke in Cuba. Boom. You know, like, I'm using it to smash the enemy who want to tell me that those kids over there are stupid. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, no, those kids aren't stupid. Those kids in Pomona Unified aren't stupid. You know, like, you know, I was born on the east side of Los Angeles. Those kids in Pomona, they're no different than me, and they're not stupid. Like, have you ever spoke Cambridge? Fuck you. You know, like, that's kind of like, that's my mentality, right? With all that shit. You know, is to use it as a hammer. I see you very similarly, and yeah, can you speak a little bit to, like, what it means for you to because I know you work with street poets, I know you work with Get Lit. Can you talk a little bit about what your approach to teaching the youth is?
Yeah, so yeah, I work with street poets now, which we work with mostly incarcerated and previously incarcerated youth. And then when I first got here, my husband, my partner in life, was working for Get Lit. He still does some work for them occasionally, but that brought me in as a teaching artist for them. They're a co-coach for their team. And whenever I'm teaching youth, my biggest thing, I mean, it brings me, I love teaching young people more than I do adults. I don't give up on adults, though. I don't believe that. I don't believe we should give up on adults, but it's something about the young people. First of all, they make me feel young still. And then they're hungry. They are hungry, a lot of them. I remember working for Get Lit, and those kids, a lot of them were just hungry to do something for this world. And that means so much, you know? But granted, not all of them, but some of the kids in Get Lit, and I'm not going to speak for all of them because that would be totally incorrect, but some of them are way more privileged, you know? And they know that. Most of them know that. So that organization working for them was a lot different than, you know, going to a place like when I worked for, like, New Earth, or Street Poets, who I work for now, who is working with a specific population. And that gets to my heart way more than any other environment. Now, granted, just because you're a kid that maybe hasn't been through the system or whatever, it doesn't mean that I don't have, like, a space for you. But when it's a kid who has been through it, who I can see my brothers in their eyes, when I can hear my own story in theirs, I never try to tell a young person, I understand, I've been there before, because no matter how similar our stories are, they're not the same. But I do tell them that I see them, and I do share my own experience. And I'm learning as I'm teaching them. I'm relearning things about my past. So my main approach with them is just connecting, letting them know I'm not here. I used to volunteer and go into the jails in Philly, you know, when I was broke. So I'm not here for the money, even though that's great. It's a plus. But I often feel guilty for getting a paycheck for doing this work. I do. I'm so grateful it comes with it. We have to sustain ourselves, but I really wish this system was different to the point that we didn't require programs like Street Poets. You feel me? I'm only knocking on wood to make sure I still get paid from something in life, but I'm grateful. I'm really grateful to do this work for them, to be able to give back. And it's my favorite thing. Teaching in a classroom I prefer that over being on stage.
Yeah. So when
yeah.
Yeah. So when you write a lot about injustice and struggle, people tend to focus on the content of what you do, and rightly so. But you talked a lot about, and I'm curious to get into this part of the conversation. You talked a lot earlier about how your style has improved since then, and how you feel like you're a better writer than when you started. So obviously, you take the question of, because oftentimes you hear people say things like, "Oh, it's all style, no substance. All style, no substance," and I understand what they're saying. But I'm aware. I feel like it should be stylized and substance. I mean, there should be style, and you seem very heavily invested in your craft. So I want to ask you, why is your writing improving from when it was? What are some of the elements and the decisions and choices you make now that have improved as a?
I'm studying my craft way more now. When I first started, it was all about, and maybe you'll understand without me having to explain, but when I first started, I was just hungry and I knew I had a story to tell. And I wanted it to be heard. So I wasn't, and not to blame anyone, because I didn't reach out for any workshops or somebody to teach me how to be a better writer. So no one came to me and said, hey, can I help you work on this? You should probably work on that. You don't need all those extra words you said. Nobody was helping me in those areas. But that's fine, because I'm happy I had that moment where I wasn't so caught up in what it's supposed to sound like or look like. I was like, I just need to be heard. And I know the way they say it is effective. So I'm going to try my own version of that. Now I'm like, okay, if in order for my art to be sustainable, in order for it to last, even when I'm not here anymore, it has to be long lasting work. It has to be well crafted work. And I want to make sure I have that balance between it being amazingly written, but it doesn't water itself down. Because you have some poets who are so caught up in, this is how I'm supposed to write it. This is what a line break is supposed to look like. And this in jam it's supposed to look like, yada, yada. And then they go ahead and it loses some of its, what's the word? It loses something. The poem.
It's unique. Yeah.
I've heard poets on stage, or I've read their poems, but especially when they read it. And I'm like, that sounds like a really great poem. That is an amazing poem. But it also sounds like the same poem I heard about 1,000 other poets read. And
you are honest.
I want to be honest, but I'm always coming from a place of love. I know there's so many poets in the world that we all can't sound super 100% unique. I get that. We're going to overlap. Somebody's going to sound like this. Somebody's going to sound like that person. I get that. But I try my best every day. If I write a poem and I like it, guess what? I better also be satisfied that it sounds like I wrote it. And it sounds like only I could have written it, at least in that moment, at least in my own space. I never want to sound like, whoa, I did what such and such did. Watch me go on stage and it's going to get all the applause. Even if that got me like 100 more gigs, I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror. My career, whatever accolades I get from that wouldn't be worth it. And some may say that sets me back, but whatever.
Oh, you're doing great. I was in Santa Rosa and I heard this guy say, like, he was kind of bragging to me, and I don't know. He thought I thought I would think it was cool or something. He's like, watch this. This is my Buddy Wakefield poem, right? And he got up there and he sounded like Buddy Wakefield, and it was a good impression. But I was like, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of Buddy copiers, and that's whenever I think I sound like someone else, I'm
gonna do it. That's the. I was like,
wow. I've heard a lot of whenever I feel like I sound like another poet, or maybe I've written something another poet has written before, I ask a friend or a peer, or I ask that poet if I'm close enough to them and be like, did you write something like this before? Do you think I sound like this person? Like I remember one of the last times I was at DPL, a friend of mine happened to be there, and I got on stage during the second half, just having fun. I was hosting the second half. And I was like, I'm going to try this poem out, but let me know if that sounds like such and such. I actually think I said, let me know if it sounds like a little bit of, I might have said Buddy. I'm not sure. I had a part. I know I don't sound like Buddy, but I think there was a part in there. I was like, okay. And then, they were honest with me and they said no. And then I asked another person just to be sure, because sometimes people are just nice. So yeah, honesty in poetry is a number one for me.
Well, I've always believed that if you are able to develop your own kind of standard of excellence, that puts you in a really good position, because then nobody can discredit you, because you know why you're good. I mean, you know the particulars of why you're good. You know what's good about your writing. Like, and you become the leading expert as to why you are good, why you are excellent. Then like it's just a different headspace than like, and then wondering if I like, like, oh, did I do that right, or is that wrong, or is it, like, it's like kind of like this mist that you're trying to grab a hold of. That's like greatness or something like that. Like, if you know why you're good, then that's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we got some questions from the audience. We have a question from Daniel Garcia Ordaz. He asks, "How do you encourage talented writers, especially youth, who are reluctant to share their poetry out loud?"
I never force a young person. By force, I mean I never go, come on, come on. What I do is I'm honest about how I feel when I go on stage. I like to tell them, I like to let them see me as human, not this person, this expert adult that has come in the room and knows better than them. So I go, just to let you know, I'm nervous every time I go on stage, which is true. When I'm not nervous, I actually do terrible. Just to know, I've cried on stage plenty of times. I tell them all those vulnerable things. When I'm really honest, about 75% of the time, that works. It helps. And they get up there and they share. And they're like, oh my gosh. A lot of them were probably like, that was so hard. Oh my gosh, but I'm so glad I did that. I'm so glad I let that out. And then other times it doesn't work. I'm never the type of teacher. I've seen other teaching artists do it, and I won't criticize them too much, but they'll be like, no, you have to share. Come on, you can do it. And they'll be like, come on. And I'm like, I just don't believe in forcing anyone to have to, especially young people, because they're writing about a lot of pain and personal things. So if it's a poem about like a cat and why your cat is cute, I'll probably be like, come on. But when I know they're writing from a very vulnerable place, I don't force that. And sometimes that cute cat poem could be vulnerable too, because you may have written about that, but the vulnerability of hearing your voice out loud in front of people for the first time, I've seen people cry about poems that weren't even emotional, because it's just a vulnerable feeling. So I'm very delicate when I'm trying to persuade young people, but I just let them know that I'm there with them. I'm in the same space, even if I've been doing this for decades now.
Yeah. We have another question here again from Daniel. He's got a lot of questions. I think I'm going to limit him at 2 or 3. He also does interviews and stuff like that. So I know he comes here and he starts running interviews off my page. Anyways, what's the best advice you received as a young writer back in the day?
Best advice was advice I did not take, because I was a little bit too arrogant. I was in high school and the twin poets came to visit us. I think I was in the 10th grade. And the twin poets, I think they said to me pretty much that I don't need all the extra words that were in my poem, pretty much to clean it up. Mm-hmm. And my response was something along the lines of, oh, I write like this all the time. Trust me, it's fine. This is how I write. It's good. And I wasn't trying to be rude. They did like poems for us, and they were trying to help us with our poems. I respected them. They actually they're a big part of my story of getting out there and doing my thing. But man, I wonder if they remember that, and they probably think I'm an asshole to this day. I don't know. I hope they don't. But that was the best advice I got as a young poet, because other than that, nobody was really giving me advice. They was just applauding me when I think I needed more advice than ever.
Yeah. Can you share with our audience a little bit who the twin poets were and their impact on poetry?
Yeah, the twin poets are I guess quote unquote old school poets. I'm pretty sure they were on Def Poetry Jam. They have a poem that's very known. They go, dreams are illegal. It's so great. They had locks back in the day. I think both of them or one of them cut their locks now, and they are from Delaware. If they're not from there, they definitely live there. And one of them is like running for office or ran for office. They're amazing. They're still showing up. I don't know if they still tour or do poems, but I know they still show up for community, and from what I can see online. So they're very influential, and they remind me of all the poets who have done great things and who inspired the next generation of poets who I wish would get talked about more, because everyone deserves their flowers.
Oh, yeah. No, well, thank you for sharing with the audience about that information. Now, I'm curious myself. Okay, so I had Tongo Easton Martin on here, and me and him were going back and forth talking about style, talking about how you complete poems, stuff like that. So I'm curious with you, like when you sit down to write a poem, I mean, how do you from start to finish? What's that process look like?
Uh, it's interesting because I feel like a rhythm of the poem. I create my poems a lot. I'm very influenced by music. Music, I don't know if it's still the case, but overall throughout my life, music inspired me way more than poems did, especially when I wasn't really a big reader back in the day. I wasn't reading other poems, which is terrible. Please read other poems. But back in the day, I wasn't. I was just listening to a lot of music. It's a lot of my favorite performers were those who were really good at taking up, filling the stage with just them. So I'm thinking of like my favorite artist of all time, Prince, just like his performance style. So I copied them, not just in how I performed, but how I wrote. I wanted something that felt like music. So I went in and I didn't plan it out. It's just I had a kind of like, it's hard to describe. It's more of a feeling, but I had like a sound in my head, like a rhythm in my head. And I just wanted to take the words and fill that in. Sometimes I see like a pattern. I'm very visual with my work too. I see colors. I see patterns and stuff, and I want to fill that in. So it's a feeling that feeling. It's a feeling I'm filling in with words.
Yeah, yeah, I like that rhythms and patterns and
Mm-hmm.
so okay. Well, so when you got started, you're saying that Twin Poets said that perhaps you're using too many words. I think that's a pretty, I mean, for people who want to write about the story of their times, like just shorthand political poets, I think that's like the problem almost all of them have, and not everyone gets beyond it. But that's the issue of that they want to like make a statement, and they want all its nuances and all the different things and all the historical rejoinders and all the footnotes, right? So they're doing these poems. They just have too many goddamn words. Did you have that? I know. That's how I started. But like, did you have? Was that your issue, or what were they referring to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say everything. I wanted to say it all. So I would say, and then in Camden, a city like mine, I walk down the street and then I see I'm telling every detail, and you forget that a poem is not about telling everything. It's not about trying to convince someone to feel a certain, well, that's debatable, but it's not trying to explain. It's trying to paint the picture. It's trying to give a feeling overall. It's trying to charge someone up with a visual or audible piece of art.
Yeah.
It's a piece of art, and you can still get the same message across. I think way more effective without all those. And by extra words, sometimes that means just like those little prepositions. I mean, take away that the. You don't need that. You don't need to know those genes. Maybe it really depends on the poem. And sometimes you just got to look through and say, what is taking up space here? How can I get more? How can I get to the heart faster? How can I get to the spirit of the reader faster? And that's by taking out the things that maybe don't matter. And that's up to you. There's no exact science behind that. It's up to the writer. It's a feeling. Again, it's always a feeling. It's like, this works. There's no exact science behind painting anything. There's rules, put in quotes. There's guidelines. You go to a painting class or a music class or poetry class, they're going to tell you what works. But I believe in breaking the rules when it makes sense.
Right. I think that the problem, a lot of the like kind of politicized poets, like really, people who want to run politics, is they also feel the need to tell everything in chronological order. Like this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And there's this idea of like this fidelity to I mean, I don't know. It's presenting like a boring history teacher.
Yes. Oh gosh, it's a poet. There's a poet who works for Get Lit now, Kelly Grace Thomas, I believe. Her last name actually changed. She recently got married. But Kelly, I taught something for her class one time, somewhere here in LA. I forgot what school she worked for, but she gave a really cool lesson in the middle of my workshop. She was just adding on to something I was saying. She said there's more than one way to enter a poem, just how there's more than one way to enter a house. Everyone thinks about going through the front door, but you can go through the window. If you have a chimney, you can go through the chimney. You can blow the roof off, and I think about that with a poem. There's no one way to enter that poem. And especially with newer poets, they're always like, So what happened first was, and it's there, and then that might work depending on the poem, but it's always about reimagining even the imaginative. How do we reimagine everything and make it pop?
Make it pop, be dynamic. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So can you tell us about some of the new projects you're working on with I remember you had mentioned that you and Matthew are working on to bring out an organization that you're putting together now. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so right now I have a baby organization. I call it a baby organization because it's only about, I think we're about almost 3 years now. I think we'll be 3 years in the fall, and it's called Spoken Literature Art Movement, acronym SLAM. We have nothing to do with slam poetry whatsoever, which I think makes it a lot cooler. But if we might end up incorporating slam one year, we'll see. I don't really want to, but Matthew does. But yeah, we're all about our organization. Right now, we conduct group workshops 2 cycles a year at ArtShare in downtown LA. We do private lessons, and we occasionally do special events. And right now we're doing online lessons because of the pandemic. And our main goal, we're not just trying to develop better writers and be another workshop organization. We're trying to also help develop the individual. And you can't create the individual. You can't come in and try to be like, okay, now you're a better person because you have this workshop. We're trying to take whatever is probably already there and see how we can just like bring that light out through poetry, spoken word, whatever you want to call it. So we do both writing and performance lessons. Oh, we also collaborate with the Poetry Lounge. We do workshops there as well. The point is, we're about community. We're always challenging our students to show up. We say, how do you use your work for better? We always tell them we're not trying to make anybody an activist here because we know everybody doesn't have the capacity to do the same type of work or activism, but are you challenging yourself to at least try to show up for somebody else as well as yourself every day in some capacity? And if you can't, that's a whole nother workshop. But yeah, we're really proud of it. We just became an LLC the beginning of this year, or no, at the end of last year. And we're doing awesome, but we're taking our time. I'm not trying to have, I'm personally am not trying to have a really large organization. Not trying to have anything on like a B&V level or anything like that. Probably not even like a Get Lit or Street Poets level. I just, at this moment, because you never know how our hearts and minds change, I just want this small but very mighty organization that is doing great things for the communities that we happen to be surrounded by.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely a much needed service. So you're part of the kind of the lounge infrastructure. Can you talk about what the lounge is doing right now in terms of migrating all their stuff onto the internet?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So as far as I can see right now, we're doing bi-monthly slams on Instagram Live. The lounge is super popular, very popular for those who know. So it's hard enough to have a fair way to do the list in person, but it's been really interesting online. And my peers like Jasmine or Shihan or maybe Jessica, Jessica can tell you that it's been quite interesting having people trying to sign up online because we put the flyer out. And then they have whoever signs up first, whoever DMs first gets on there, and it gets filled in like a couple seconds. But yeah, we're doing bi-monthly open mics. That's been going okay. Nothing's the same online. It's it is what it is. But we keep going because community is looking for us. They hunger for it. And then they continued the collaboration with us with we're doing the other 2 weeks in the month. We're doing our workshops. And to be honest, we could do those on our own. Slam, Spoken Literature Art Movement. We don't need DPL, but it's not about that. It's about the fact that we've already have this relationship, and they also help promote ours, which is kind of cool. And it just shows that we're still together, even in times of chaos. We have this togetherness. So it's been going pretty well. And I'm excited to see. I was going to say I'm excited to see how it's going to grow, but honestly, I just want this whole thing to be over with so we don't have to grow it and just get back. But yeah, if we happen to be in a situation a lot longer. Geez, I am looking forward to seeing how we adapt even more.
Yeah. Okay, so we're coming up on the hour. Are there any like kind of words of wisdom you want to offer? Words of encouragement, wisdom, or whatever for people who are trying to get into the write, just trying to get into writing and trying to they want to write, they want to share, but they don't know how. Can you?
My best piece of advice off the top of my head might come from my own experience, which is to dive in, being honest, dive in, just saying, this is how I feel. I need to let this out. Because now, if you're already studying the work, maybe nothing we could do about that. That's fine. That's great. That's amazing. I salute you, because I wish I did at first. But dive in, just saying, this is how I just need to let this out. And then go ahead and see how can you make your work even better by practicing and studying the craft and taking the craft very seriously. And in the midst of all that, challenge yourself to stay true to your own voice as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Aleysha. I really appreciate it for joining us this out, and sure we'll see each other soon.
Thank you.
Don't go.